All right, we're recording. Hello, welcome everybody who's going to be watching this. I just want to do a quick introduction before we get started. My name is Chris Jaworski. Uh, who I am really is not super important. I do a little bit of studying. I do a little bit of acting sometimes. I do a lot of reading. But most importantly in this context is you might recognize my voice if you're a fan of Penny Castle. If you bought the audiobook for her last book, Cure, which she co-wrote with Joshua Castle. And yeah, so that's how I know Penny. We've worked together before. And so I am interviewing her today because of my great performance skills, I guess you could call them.
Your lovely voice.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and if you saw the little Facebook advertisement that Penny put up recently, I dressed up for it because I usually don't wear this around my house. Anyway, I'm digressing. Let's get into it. So I'm here today to interview Penny about her new book that's coming out. It's called Cultivating Happiness, and I have a little bit of an advanced reader copy here that I got to read. How I tried and failed to implement self-help strategies and accidentally got happier, which I think is a bit of a mouthful, but it also makes a lot of sense given the content of the book. So, Penny. So the book hits shelves, or I guess electronic shelves, on the 22nd of January this month. But it's still available for pre-sale, yes?
Yes.
How's the launch going?
So Amazon will allow you to buy a advanced copy, like a pre-order of the ebook, but not the printed book. But it is going really well. So in our category, we are the #1 new release, and we're sitting at number 5 in a reasonably obscure category, admittedly. But I think what I'm most excited about is that we are beating Monty Don, who's like the god of gardening book kind of authors. So like I sent a note to my parents the other day going, I'm beating Monty Don, and they were like, very nice. Who is he?
Well, it's good to know who Monty Don is, and good to know that you're beating him.
Yeah, take that, good. Monty Don.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because there could be people who are tuning into this who don't really know you. Tell us about yourself.
Okay, cool. So up until 2 years ago, I had spent the last 10 years being an executive coach after a corporate career. And during that, I started off as a general coach, but during the course of that time, I really specialized in happiness. So I worked with some really big corporates and individuals across the world, really coaching them and training them on how to be happier. And a lot of this stuff comes out of the world of positive psychology, because one of the things I felt when I was trained as a coach was that it was really like a serious business, and it was based then on a lot of quite dated psychological and philosophical kind of stuff. And I really liked the positive psychology because it's all humanist, experiment backed. So I got really excited about the stuff and implemented it in my coaching career. And along the way decided, but if you really want to see if this stuff works, you should do it yourself. And that is really how the book came into being, is that after this long career of training people to be happy, I decided to try it on myself, not always with the success that I had hoped for.
Okay, so I have a question that I was going to get to later, but it sounds kind of more like what we're talking about right now. So is that why you chose to focus on happiness in this book, is because there were all these, like you say, ideas, and you were like, let me just test pilot them? Is that
a little bit, A little bit, but I've always been interested in the idea of happiness as a subject matter, you know. So growing up and during my training, happiness was always sort of positioned as something like you were born with, like it's a God-given talent to be happy. And then along came the positive psychology movement and said, no, happiness is a skill. It can be learned. You can learn how to be happy. You can build that kind of muscle. And so happiness is something I'd always been interested in, because I remembered these times in my life where there'd been such happiness. And then I got into the kind of corporate world, and I remember feeling what it was like to succeed or to achieve a goal. But early in my coaching career, I had a coach of my own, and he said, so what makes you happy? And I couldn't remember. And then really that's what kind of triggered it. It's like, what, you can't remember what makes you happy? So that's when I got really interested in happiness, both as an academic subject, but also as a kind of experiment for me of like, well, why can't I have that too?
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to jump back a little bit, and then we'll get back into the book itself. So like I said in the introduction, I did the audiobook for Cure. You can check it out on audible.com.
And it's wonderful. He sounds fab.
Wonderful. So it's a little bit different though from Cultivating Happiness. That was like a sci-fi adventure story that you co-wrote with Josh. And this one is like a memoir / gardening / self-help kind of thing. Why the leap? And it seems like a kind of a big leap.
Yeah. So the truth is, I'm not a science fiction writer. That wasn't my story. So I was coaching up until 2 years ago when my son was diagnosed with a terminal illness. And shortly before he died, he told me the story that he wanted to write. And I actually really don't know why. I just decided I would write notes on what he was telling me and on that time. And then after he died, I decided that I would sort of, to help myself deal with the grief, but also to honor Josh, I decided to write this little story that he had created. And really that was how Cure came about. I was already sort of 80% of the way through writing Cultivating Happiness, but I put it to one side to write Cure. So I'm not really a science fiction writer, although I had a lot of fun with that. But really, it's actually like happiness is really my thing, you know, even the Cure is really not a happy book.
Now, speaking of the idea of happiness and kind of like packaging it into a book, a bit of a stereotype, I guess, is that when you're talking about a nonfiction book in South Africa, especially a memoir, they often deal with something traumatic or overcoming adversity or something like that. It's a bit of a motif that we see. You know, you lost Josh last year. Why didn't you write that story? Why did you write this story?
Well, on the one hand, like I felt like the Josh story was too recent, but actually I'm not a big fan. I call them misery memoirs. I'm not a big fan of those stories of like, you know, oh, I have overcome this, I have overcome that. I mean, one is just they're not that interesting to me as a reader, but also I don't like that idea that that you have to have overcome something in order for your life to have meaning or to, be interesting. I think we've kind of created in the last few years this kind of culture of like, you've overcome adversity, that somehow makes you a better person. But if you think about it, if you think about, like, for me as a parent, we spend our whole lives trying to make our kids' lives great. so they don't have to overcome this terrible thing. And yet we have at the same time this culture of you're only worthy if you've overcome something, like, you know, so they're kind of at a philosophical base. It didn't feel right to me. But actually, when I think about who I am, what are the things I like to read, like, I'm funny. I'm not really very good at being, you know, I mean, even at you know, Josh's memorial, we made it a superhero day, you know. So yeah, so those are the things that interest me. And I guess my way of dealing with a lot of adversity in life is to think about what's the funny story here? What's the angle that it becomes something, you know, that's uplifting and optimistic. I think that's just who I am. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in the book, getting back to the book itself now.
Yeah.
It flips between being in the, you know, present day, or like the kind of present timeline, and remembering stories from the past. So why did you go with that route? Was it because you mentioned something earlier about remembering these times in your past that were very, very potent, happy memories for you? Was it kind of that, to try to look back at the things that made you happy and the things that weren't making you happy?
Yeah. I mean, when I started thinking about happiness, and the happiest time in my life, the happiest time in my life was before I started school. I have really, really vivid memories of that. And I grew up on this farm in Yorkshire, and, you know, I was basically feral. You know, we lived in a time and a place where you could just be gone for days and no one really worried. You know, it was back in the world where it was like, be home for dinner or else, you know. And I remembered, as I started thinking about, you know, these things that were happening in my life in the current times, and how I was making sense of this, the things that came up in the memories were often times of, you know, when being really, you know, young and having this wild, really wild life, you know. So, and then a lot of the ideas of things that I was trying to do to make myself happy sprung from those times. So, for example, in the book, one of the chapters is about me deciding, you know, I had read a study that exercise was related to, there's lots of data that suggests that people who exercise more are happier, and it's a good, for mild depression, it's a good activity. So in one section of the book, I talk about how I then had this kind of mini project that I would find my sport, because I hate exercising. You know, I'm one of those people who is like, I go to the gym so that I won't have a heart attack, not because there is any pleasure in it. So I had decided, though, instead of having this misery of going to the gym, I would set about finding my sport, finding that thing that, you know, I loved to do, I was looking forward to doing. And so, for example, then at that point I thought, well, you know, when we were kids, we grew up with ponies and horses, and it was a wonderful time, and I had all these adventures. And then my sister was like, hey, let's go riding, that'll be fun. And pain ensued.
All right. So in the book, I remember one of my questions was how many names had to be changed, because you kind of you kind of prod the self-help industry and the coaching industry a little bit. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, quite a few names. You know, it is when I remember hearing a story of the author of The Glass Castle, which is one of my all-time favorite memoirs. I remember hearing that after the book was hit the shelves, she spent the next 2 days hiding under her desk. And I feel it might be a little bit like that for me. Yeah, I do poke a lot of fun at it. I found, the coaching world is one of my big irritations about the coaching world is what I call this kind of spiritual materialism. It's like, I'm a better meditator than you, I have read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I've read, lots of Scandi noir crime fiction. So yeah, I think quite a lot of I'm hoping that they will have developed a sense of humor in the interim. One of the things that, the people in the coaching community are wonderful, gentle, evolved people. But their sense of irony often isn't terribly well developed. So I'm hoping it's become developed since I've had all these interactions. But yeah, I do go about poking a lot of fun at the bits of it that, one of the things that I found is that, you go in to learn something and you join an industry and there's all these people who are kind of put up there as these like God figures. And at the time you're trying so hard to fit in, you're trying so hard to be like them, And then it's only when you look back and you're like there's one particular moment in the book I talk about where we are doing yoga in the UCT business school, and it is freezing there in winter, and there's one moment in the book that I remember particularly thinking like my bum was like frozen solid, and at the time I was like, well, I must be growing. This is a great experience. Whereas now I'm like, why didn't I just go, actually, I'm really cold. I'm not going to do this one. And at the time, it didn't occur to me. It was just like, well, this is a great experience, kind of like, being really miserable. Well, that must clearly be important to being a coach rather than going, this is stupid. We should put the heating on.
So is that a thing you think that is kind of in the self-help and coaching kind of ethos, is that we're going to convince ourselves this works until it works.
Yeah.
But you have kind of found something else. You found something like, your personal kind of behavior and your personal likes and dislikes, and don't necessarily do yoga in a cold studio just because somebody says that it's probably good for you.
Yeah, or a very hot one for that matter, because that also didn't work out. Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think also, I think it is changing a little bit now, but I mean, this is sort of going back 10, 12 years. At the time, a lot of the material in the self-help world came out of the world of abnormal psychology. So implicit in a lot of the stuff that was being taught was that you are somehow not enough. You're a little bit broken. And the world of positive psychology going, hang on a moment, you don't need to be broken down to be built up. You can just build up, that you are enough. And if there's stuff that you'd like to do better, then we can do that better. That really emerged over the course of my coaching practice, but it wasn't part of my learning or training. So a lot of the training as coaches is this kind of like, unless you are, living on a mountain in Tibet somewhere, then you're probably not evolved enough. And, so one of my, a theme that runs through the book of the fact is like, I'm not evolved. I'm just doing the best I can.
Like we all are.
Yeah, usually with not much success,
Yeah. So one of my favorite parts of the book is this character named Sally. Can you tell us a little bit about Sally? How real is she to you, and how much of her is a bit of a construct for your negative thoughts in this book?
Yeah. So let me start with explaining. So what happened in the book was early in my coaching career, I was identified as having a big inner critic. And what that means kind of for the layman is that I am inclined to think that I am not enough, to criticize myself quite a lot, And one of the coaches I was working with said, what could be really useful for you is if you you separate this out and make it a kind of, you think almost of it as a separate identity. And that you can, because, the thinking behind an inner critic is it comes from the kind of psychoanalytical world of being your superego. And the superego's role is to keep you safe. But your superego is developed when you are tiny, like a baby. And so the thinking is like your superego is trying really hard to help you and get things right, but it's often like, autocorrect. It's like trying really hard to help you, but it's, you end up then sending your parents inappropriate messages, So this coach had suggested to me, so maybe you should think about who, this identity is something separate, And when I thought about whose voice it was the voice of actually someone who was one of my first bosses, who told me again and again that I was not appropriate in the corporate world. In retrospect, she was right, but, but that was the voice. And as I was writing the book, I was thinking, there's all these negative thoughts, but it can be really boring, actually, like somebody just writing away about, and I hated myself, and I didn't think I'd done this right, and I didn't think I'd done that right. So I thought that it might be fun to recreate Sally as a construct and create her as a separate character who is then often with me. So, it's like a two for the price of one. I'm a great deal in this book. Because you get my memoir, but you get Sally too.
Okay. So kind of in that same vein, Sally is a bit of a, conduit for the negative thoughts you experience in the book.
Yeah.
But how real are you as a character? Because I read it and I was, I know you as a very, very fun, very outgoing person. And in the book, you have a bit more of a kind of inner turmoil, I guess it is, where you're very concerned with being as happy as you can be. So how close is that to the real Penny?
Yeah, so I thank you for your inadvertent commentary on my brilliant acting skills. And in fact, it's a comment that actually my brother made when he read the book, because he was like, "But we always think of you as successful, confident Penny, and then you've written this book that says actually you were really desperately unhappy for large periods of your life." And I guess that is. It is real. So for me, is a lot of the time is like, it's actually in the book, but I remember my mother going, if you pretend to be happy for long enough, eventually you will be happy. And the message I got was like, pretend to be happy. Whatever you do, act like you're happy, So a lot of the time, I think I'm getting better at being more honest about it now, but, I've spent my whole life, wanting to fit in and never really feeling like I did, never really feeling like I stacked up against everyone, or, I remember for years, every time we would go out with friends or to a party, I would come home and I'd be like, Shannon, was I too loud? Were my jokes inappropriate? I told that joke about sex, like, oh my God, like, do they now think I'm, this like trashy kind of woman, So yeah, it is really real, but it's a piece of me that not many people see. And it's kind of one of the things that Shannon and I don't agree on in the book, because, for me, Shannon is he is like the arbiter of all things. So I'll be like, Shannon, how did I do? And he'll be like, you did fine, And then for me, I'm like, oh, that's okay, I did fine. And he's like, but you make me sound really like boring, and that I'm always trying to escape you, which he is actually.
Okay. So speaking of Shannon, I know that a lot of the other early readers, not just myself, but myself definitely included, he's got the best lines in the book. How did he respond to the book? Was he say, yes, this is a fair Fair assessment?
No, he was like, you made me sound like a beep. um, but actually, I think of all the characters, how I portray them is probably mostly how he is. You know, Shannon is one of those really objective and emotional kind of people. I remember when we got married, he was like, okay, I have told you now today that I love you. And if there is a change in status, you will be copied on that memo. And that's the kind of guy he is. I mean, he does lots of lovely things. He's not like an automat, but Chan is not like a really emotional person. I do not know how actually like the most unemotional person in the universe was attracted to somebody who is this ball of anxiety. So he thinks I made him out to be like this, like, you know, really unpleasant man. I'm like, but I love that about you. Like, you know, you don't put up with my nonsense.
I will say I identified very closely with him, where there's a few scenes where it's just like, you know, you describe kind of going up to him and he's just lying in bed reading a book, and I'm like, that's the dream, you know. Just hanging out doing that. So what other feedback have you received?
Yeah, the feedback has been really good. So we haven't got the reviews in yet because they're still kind of a couple of weeks away before we can load them. But I have had awesome feedback. So I have had really, really nice feedback from people I really respect. So you will know our dear friend Taylor, who did some editing in the book. But I mean, she is like just, you know, told me I'm amazing, you know, which, you know, obviously is a lie, but made me very happy to hear. I've had English lecturers tell me that they loved it. So yes, so far, like, you know, what I found really exciting is, you know, when people send you an email and they don't have to, and they were like, yes, you know, like, I just wanted to tell you that, you know, I'd taken a sip of tea and then I read your book and then I laughed and tea came out my nose. And I think if you're writing like a comedy memoir, like that, you don't get better feedback than, you know, making people snort their tea.
It's great.
Yeah, so it's been really good so far. Yeah. So obviously not. I haven't had lots of feedback from the people whose names had to be changed.
So that's kind of another thing I was wondering, and I think you did touch on it earlier, but it's a bit of a narrow focus, because a lot of memoirs are about like big celebrities or, you know, big historical figures and stuff like that. This is about kind of the world of corporate coaching. Did you want to kind of split that open with this book? Or was it just like, hey, this is my personal background and the context that I tried to get happy in, and this is how it happened for me?
Yeah, I mean, there was no real kind of like agenda. I just had the story that I wanted to tell, you know, and, you know, happiness is my thing, you know, but I just, you know, when I started writing the book, so I've been wanting to be a writer since I can remember, you know, and I decided, oh, it's 3 Novembers ago now, you know what, actually, I'm going to get a mentor. I'm going to take this seriously. I will finish a book and get it published. And this was just the story that, you know, it was supposed to, I actually had 2 books that I wanted to write. So one was a memoir about being a coach, and one was a gardening book, a kind of how-to, like a, you know, even a boring corporate coach can have a veggie patch if they want one, you know. And when I started working with the memoir, with the mentor, you know, he was like, this could be one really good book, you know, like it doesn't have to be 2 books. So it kind of, the 2 stories intertwined and became one story, you know. And yeah, so there was no kind of big agenda. There's no statement being made. It's just the story I wanted to tell.
And I will say, I think you do a really good job with that. I'm glad you melded the 2 of them, because it very much highlights the almost kind of grim drudgery you feel in those chapters, where you're like, you're going to the car dealership again and you're dealing with this person who doesn't listen to you, and then you you go home and you work on the part of the garden that's just peppers. And it's so interesting because I had never really thought of myself as a person with a green thumb or something. But after reading it, I got excited about actually planting stuff in my tiny little garden that I have out in the apartment here.
Yeah.
So I will say it does a very good job of really highlighting that you can be productive with something that you really enjoy,
Yeah. And actually that
Mm-hmm.
those things are usually around us. So I guess that for me
Mm-hmm.
was the big learning, is that I did not expect that. It's like, so there's all these things of like, you should be doing this, you should be having goals, you should be exercising, you should be meditating, you should be doing this, that, and the other. But often the things that make us happiest are the things we overlook.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know for you, you're a great reader, yeah. But like when somebody says, "What makes you happy?" like I often forget I'm a reader too. I forget often saying, my happiest time is that hour in bed before I fall asleep every day, where I get to read my novel. Not
Mm-hmm.
my novel that I wrote, the novel that I'm reading.
Oh, yeah.
But we often forget those things that are under our noses because we're so busy kind of wanting more or being on the search. I think life in some ways has been made into a quest, and sometimes the quest is great. Sometimes though, often in my experience, the quest stuff might make us a better person, but the digestive biscuit dipped in a mug of tea is really
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah. It's the adding up of the little things that you don't necessarily think of too much. And
Yeah, and
I
we
think
don't notice,
okay, so you've mentioned a couple of times in passing that you are working on another book.
Yeah.
Are you working on more than one other book? And
I,
what's your timeline looking like as a writer for those next ones?
yeah, don't ask me about the timeline because then I'll have to go take another tranquilizer. So there are two more books in the pipeline. So one is actually just a very short book. It is part of another side project that I have going on in the kind of learning space, but really it is the technical stuff about happiness. So it is just really, it's a nonfiction book, and it's a how-to book, and it's a how to implement one of the really well tested and rigorously tested ways of improving happiness. So that is a kind of a how-to book. You want to feel a little bit happier. You want to go into a new year, instead of having resolutions that you're going to break, actually go and do these 5 things, because these are the 5 things that have the best chance of making you feel that you love your work. And it's specifically aimed at how to love the job you have, because a lot of the problem with this quest thing is that we're often like, the perfect job for you, it's out there, but we're not out there. We're here, and we've got rent to pay and medical bills and whatever. So this is kind of like, well, you are where you are. How do you make that something that's enjoyable? And then the other book, and then there's a theme of happiness that comes through all these books. So I say that there is a novel in the pipeline that I am I think about 30% way through the first draft. So I will hope to have it out this time next year, probably. But that is a fiction book about assisted suicide, but it's a comedy. So the premise of that book is what happens actually when we come to the end of our lives and we're not having fun anymore. And what happens actually if you say, actually, I would prefer to make a choice to end this than to kind of slowly degenerate into something that I don't want to be. But then a whole story unfolds about, the choices that we make and the people in our lives and their opinion on that. So, but that's the one I'm working on. I've made it sound really serious and like heavy, but it is actually, it is a comedy, you know. There is lots of women's underwear on display.
That's a theme that I'm very interested in.
The women's underwear.
Both. Yeah. That one, suicide. So, I have my dark side as well, right? But I think if you're saying, and I think you just mentioned it, and it was going to be another question of mine, is what's the big theme in the Penny Castle, mythos that you're creating here? And I think it sounds to me like it's happiness.
Yeah.
Probably most overtly in this book, but I think certainly in the next two books as well. And I think that's a very novel way to go about it. It's like, you have to kind of plumb to the the dark side a little bit to find something of what makes us happy. So I think that you might be onto something very interesting there with the comedy about assisted suicide.
Yeah, I mean, happiness is my thing, and I feel like, we're in a world where we keep getting told. And in fact, I grew up in the 80s, and it was even more so then. It was about success coming first, the competition, and then I spent 10 years listening to executives telling me how lonely it was in the corner office, and I was like, hang on a moment, we've all been told we've got to be kind of Gordon Gekko, and you guys are all miserable. So I think, one of my things is like, well, what would it be to be a happy life, And of course, there is always that is my own quest, I remember when I first started this, the novel, talking to my mentor, and I said to him, but how will I put across the themes? And he was like, forget the themes are you, because you're writing it, the themes come through, you just make your character do what they have to do next, So I think in some ways it's not even on purpose, it's just, that's who I am. I want to be happy, and I want everyone around me to be happy, I guess, I spend my life going, are you happy? How happy are you? Chris, are you happy? So I, in some ways I don't think I necessarily have a choice in that kind of thing, because that's just who I am, but I also think, that they are, if you do it in a lighter way, in a way that's, we're talking about happiness, but we're talking about a deeper or a darker subject matter, it also allows us to talk about it, because, we are living in a world where people are getting older and sicker and unhappier. And is there an alternative to that? So is there a way to be happy or not be, if that's what you want,
Okay. So I guess one of the questions that I kind of got from the book was happiness. Is it, and this is going to be a bit one of those more kind of esoteric questions, I guess. Do you think happiness is a kind of constant state? If somebody, like you said just now, like you ask a lot of people, like, are you happy? Do you think happiness is something that somebody achieves, like nirvana? Or do you think people are happy in like certain contexts? Like you in the book here, you're happy when you're gardening, and we see it come across very clearly. So do you think that people are they go from happiness to happiness, or that some people just get that zen and they are happy?
No, and it's one of those things, because I want everyone to be 100% happy all the time. And it's a conversation that Shannon and I always have. So the conversation goes like this. I say to him, if 0 is like utterly miserable and 10 is like the happiest day of your life, like what is your score? Okay. So he will go a 6. And I am like absolutely gutted by this, because a 6 for me is like, the pass mark for me is 10, right? But he's going, no, I'm not happy or unhappy. I'm just sort of here doing my thing, you know, making a
Yeah.
sandwich. You know, if making a sandwich doesn't really make me happy or unhappy, I'm just making a sandwich, not thinking about it much. And I think it is one of my issues is that for me, the pass mark is 100%. Like, I want you to be 100% happy 100% of the time. And that is always, you know, what's going on in the book, because you can't be. So every time that then somebody isn't 100% happy, I'm like, oh my God, this is a calamity, it's a disaster, you know, like Chris isn't happy, we need to make him happy, you know. And then I go on a big mission, and you are like, but you know, I was just making a sandwich, you know. So yeah,
okay.
I mean, I think the truth is like we go from happy to unhappy to nothing, like a billion times a day, you know. But you know, one of my things is like, but that's not enough for me. I want you to like be happy all the time.
Okay.
So, and as soon as you're like nothing, I want a plan, you know.
So one thing, I think the last like kind of weird esoteric question I want to ask about happiness is, how, in your own words, do you think that people can best be happy? Is it to focus on the little things that make them happy, like we were talking about before?
Yeah. So I mean, there's like, you know, so much literature out there on tests of the people that things can do. But like one of the, so there are a whole host of things that you can do, but one of them is just really focusing on the things that make you happy and doing more of those, you know. So, you know, it's noticing, you know. So I mean, I come out in hives when I have the, you know, the gratitude crowd. Let's be grateful, you know. Because you know, the gratitude crowd go, oh my goodness, you know, your leg has just been chopped off. Like, what's the lesson here that you can really be grateful for? And for me, it's like, no, I want to break things when I hear that, you know. But it's like, you know what? It's like, I'll give you a good example. Like my husband, oh, he's not going to like this, yeah. He gets a lot of pleasure out of watching pimple popping videos, okay? like he just likes them.
You heard it here first.
Hey?
I said you heard it here first, Facebook.
Yeah. Look, I have to be honest, I am no better because I do not actually own any makeup, but one of the things that makes me happy is watching those clips where you see men transform themselves into female celebrities. Like half the time I don't even know who the celebrities are because I'm not like into celebrities, but I really like watching those. And so silly things like that, that's a really good strategy for making yourself happier. There are a whole load of things. I mean, flow is one of the concepts of, like, you know, when you're working at the edge of what is possible for you to do and what you have the skills to do, those moments where you're absolutely engrossed in what you're doing, that's a really good strategy to be happy. In fact, that's what the non-fiction book is about. Which is counterintuitive because we tend to think, no, it's sipping pina coladas on a beach. And actually, sipping pina coladas on a beach gets stale really quickly, I'm told. I haven't actually done it, but I'm told it's, you know, after a day or two, it gets boring.
You should probably test it out as, you know, research for your next book, you know?
I think you're right. So yeah, I mean, but the main thing actually about happiness is breaking free of the assumption that you are broken or that you are not enough. And it's about finding the things that are good and positive and amplifying those, so giving those attention. Often that's what it boils down to, is if I give attention to the things that make me happy in whatever format that is, that's a strategy for being happier. Because, you know, if you are thinking about how crappy your job is and what a bastard your boss is, you know, you're giving that airtime. You know, I remember having a boss saying to me that they didn't rent that space in your head. Don't let them take it, you know. If you are thinking about the things, you know, how great it's going to be when you get home and you see the kittens, like, or my puppies, Like those are things, like when you think about those are things that lift you up, right? So those are, I mean, that's just one really good strategy. There's a whole host more, but that's one really good strategy at just, amplifying your levels of happiness,
Okay. All right. So you've taken a bit of an unusual approach to publishing this book as a South African author. How can people get their hands on it? You mentioned that it's going to be out in ebook form on the 22nd.
Yeah.
But what else?
Okay, so from the 22nd onwards, you'll be able to get it from Amazon on print on demand if you are a paper copy person. But I have indie published this. So when the manuscript was finished, I was chatting to somebody who's a very well-known, I won't embarrass her here, but she's a very well-known, very well-respected South African author. And I had sent the manuscript off. One of the publishing houses in South Africa actually asked to see the manuscript. And so I sent it off to them. And like after 3 months, like they hadn't even acknowledged my email. And so this friend of mine said, Penny, you've got to understand that the South African publishing industry is really disorganized and really slow. And I was like, yeah, but the problem is I'm not like that. I'm a really organized, pacey person. My challenge in life is often to slow down, not go faster. And so actually when I wrote Cure, I used that as an experiment to see, hey, could I actually do with this indie publishing thing? And it worked really well. So I decided to indie publish this. So it's not going to be available, unfortunately, in South African bookstores. You'll need to buy it online. So your options at the moment are to buy it as an ebook from your electronic bookstore of choice. So it is on pre-order on Amazon, but it's also on Nook and Barnes and Noble and Tolino and Kobo and all the different and the Apple bookstore. So whatever your preference for reading ebooks is, or if you want a paper version of the book, then it's available through Amazon print on demand. So the book itself is not terribly expensive, but obviously it will be Amazon print on demand. So your transport costs, your courier costs will make it, I think you'll probably come out, it'll be the same price as having bought it off the shelves in a South African bookstore, but it will be the courier fees, not the book, that breaks the bank. That one, yeah. But no, I in South Africa, a bestseller is 3,000 copies of a book. And if you go through a brick and mortar store, you see very little of the income from that. So I was like, if I'm getting like, I don't know, 10 Rand a book, and let's say it's an amazing bestseller, and I've sold 3,000 copies, like I spent a year on this. I want to make more than that. So actually going the indie route allowed me to be able to make the book much more inexpensive for readers, but actually have the potential for me to actually earn a living.
Okay. All right. So it's safe to say that you're a bit of a fan of the indie publishing route.
I am a huge fan of indie publishing. Yeah. It's I mean, as part of doing this, I was reading up all the stuff from the kind of indie publishing, because it used to be like, oh, you couldn't get a book deal, that's why you indie published, and the kind of vanity presses and what have you. Whereas now, actually, a huge amount of the best-selling authors are choosing, I mean, for goodness sake, J.K. Rowling's indie published a whole lot of her works. So I'm like, you know what, like if it's good enough for J.K. Rowling, I can do this too. I mean, and maybe I could even sell as many books as, even if I sold as many books as she sells in like a week over over my lifetime, I would be good with that.
So you mentioned to me before that if you pre-order Cultivating Happiness before the 22nd, you get all sorts of stuff. What is this
Yeah.
stuff?
So for the people who pre-order, and thank you so much for the people who already have, I've got some lovely goodies for you. So there's some stuff you're just going to get that's for you only. So one of the things that I did was I created a clickable infographic that shows all the books that I used along the way. So if you are somebody who reads a memoir and goes, oh no, but hang on a moment, where did you get that idea from? I put together all those resources and made it clickable, so you can literally download it and click on it, and it will take you to the site on Amazon where you can get, you can look at that material.
Great.
And that will only be available on 12th to 22nd, and it's only available for pre-order people. The second thing that people are going to get is they will get an advance copy of a little book that I wrote. It's a short book. It's like it's called 13 Tiny Tales of Woe, and it's a flash fiction book. So none of the stories in there are longer than 500 words. And it's split. There's half the book of nonfiction and half of fiction. And they are just those, those little stories where sometimes you're sitting in a coffee shop going, I wonder what that barista thinks of all the people around here. And little stories like that. So that is a book that eventually will become generally available. But for the people who pre-order, you'll be getting that 3 to 6 months before anybody else. And then the third thing, Penny's having a senior moment. The third thing that you will be getting is access to the 5-week challenge. And the 5-week challenge is it's 5 weeks of failure. So what that is a Facebook group and a challenge that I have set up. It will only be for the people who have pre-ordered. And really what this is about is I have taken the strategies from the book, so that the kind of theory things that I did in the book, and you'll see it, for those of you who read the book, that you will see, like, I failed a lot. And actually the aim of it is to fail, because we go into every year with resolutions of like, I will lose 500 kilograms, that was my resolution, in 2017, and I've only got 600 to lose now, so we make all these goals and these resolutions, and we make like January like this really yuck month, because on day 3 we've broken the resolution, we're smoking or drinking or whatever again, or like you, who was giving up booze for your resolution, and then we all gave you booze for Christmas. You remember? He was really drunk for 5 days. No, I'm joking. So what it is actually each week to be given one of these kind of these things that we do because we feel that we should, but the aim of the challenge is to document your failure on that. So for example, like let's say this week it's all about how we're going to exercise, I would really like to see you, your bad attempt at yoga, or, like one of the things I have is like I swim as exercise, but like in order to swim, so first of all it's at the gym, so I have a shocking pink cap, and then I thought, no, but the people who are really good at swimming, they have like training snorkels. So a training snorkel is a snorkel that goes up the middle, not to the side, right? And then I have a pair of Limo green goggles, and I have to wear those ones because those were Josh's ones, so they're special. And then I have an underwater iPod, which is bright yellow, so that I can listen to stuff to make it less boring, So, like when you look at me going into the pool, it's a very odd sight, and there's this elderly Oriental lady who swims with me. And she, she's always just really polite about how odd I look. I think she's being polite because I also wear earplugs. So maybe she's telling me like, you're an idiot, but she says it with a smile. So I assume she's saying something nice. So the aim of this challenge is 1 per week to go through these things, but to fail and to share your fails. So take pictures, videos, whatever, or write your stories, but to put it into the group as a way that actually we can start 2019 maybe having a bit of fun, maybe being a little happier, rather than, you know, what are those things that were so popular, like your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, you know, which just the name is intimidating. Like, let's fail at the downward dog, you know.
Yeah.
It could be
Bit of a
fun.
way to embrace failure and just kind of not be so afraid of it and kind of have some fun with it.
And actually failures can be fun. You know.
Yeah.
And it makes for a good story, if anyway, you know, because then I'll take your pictures and make it into another book. And I'm lying, I won't do that. I promise.
Just change our name so nobody knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Christopher Jaworski.
From, yeah. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you.
Cool. Thank you.
You just, I guess, one more plug for the book, or plug for anything else you want to.
Guys, please go on to the ebook seller of your choice before the 22nd, because that's when you will get all the goodies. So what you have to do is you go on, you do your pre-order. There is on my website and also in the newsletter, you send a copy of your receipt to the mail address, which is cultivatinghappiness@gmail.com, and you send that in, and as soon as you send that in, you will get access to all your freebies. So it's really worth doing the pre-release and buying it a little bit early. Otherwise, you can get it in print if you are a Luddite like my husband. You can get the print from the 22nd of January on Amazon, print on demand. So both will be available from there. Yeah. So buy the book, guys. Buy the book. Buy the book.
And I'll just plug, if you haven't already, go check out Cure by Joshua Castle and Penny Castle. And if you really liked the sound of my voice during this little recording, go to Audible and see if you can get the audiobook as well.
Absolutely.
So that's all.
And let me tell you, he is an amazing. Actually, I don't know if you still have any codes left, but I actually have some free codes if you are in the US or Canada for the Cure version. And guys, he is amazing. If you ever want to do an audiobook, ta-da! He is amazing. So thank you, Chris. That's why I wanted you to interview me, because I'm like, well, you know, it's Penny with her nasal, you know, who usually talks about anxiety. At least we can have, you know, some ear candy, and you're hot too, baby. Yeah, that's just to annoy your wife.
Be watching it later. Hi. All right. Well, I think that about wraps things up. So I will say thank you very much, Penny, for the interview. I think we learned a lot. I hope everyone who's watching learned a lot as well. And thank you for watching as well. And I hope that you enjoy Cultivating Happiness when it hits shelves and not shelves on the 22nd of January.
Cool. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been so much fun.
All right. Thanks.